Hello collectors and welcome to my review of NECA's classic video game appearance Godzilla. This Godzilla is based off of his appearance in the game for the NES, Godzilla, Monster of Monsters, and is a slightly modified repaint of NECA's 1984 Godzilla. Many have argued that, well, it looks like crap and the head is wrong. But are these complaints justified? Well, let's take a look and see whether or not it's worth adding into your collection. The main reason for you to get this figure is the looks. No doubt this figure has an interesting paint scheme, and some slight resculpting to make it more accurate to the 8-bit design. But there are indeed some flaws to this figure, and some of them stem from factory issues, or what some may say are typical NECA issues. First off, the head. Some shading with black to bring out the grooves on his face, and those red eyes are fearsome. The white paint used on Godzilla, say for an example on the teeth, seems just a bit chalky, but given the retro feel of the figure, it isn't a major issue. Here's a look at Godzilla's chest, where you can see the pixelation effect can be found. Throughout the figure, to keep true to his in-game appearance, they pixelated some spots on Godzilla, and some find it a bit awkward. I would definitely be in that camp. I believe they could have found a different way to do it, but it's very unique. Also, I'm happy to see they gave Godzilla some pixelated nipples. A side view of Godzilla here where you can see the pixelation effect is going wild with lots of different blues. On that note, let me focus in on the dorsal plates. The center row was completely resculpted for this figure because the 8-bit design has huge dorsal plates down the middle of its back, and kudos for NECA for doing that. However, on mine, this is a good opportunity to point out this figure does have some QC issues, and it may be hard to find them because of the chaotic paint application. And as you can see on this angle, there's some paint damage on this Godzilla right out of the box. You can see some black paint up here where it shouldn't be, and some black paint down here. Lovely. Oh, as a note, these two dorsal plates, because of their sculpt, they like to collide in with each other, so it may be very, very hard to get Godzilla to line up perfectly straight, given this colliding issue. Here's a look at the tail of Godzilla, where it looks like NECA just said, screw it, don't paint the plates on the tail, they'll never notice. And finally, the legs. Here you can see another issue with this guy, and that would definitely be the mold lines, which it's not a huge deal, but it is still an issue because I know some people, they absolutely can't handle that. And here's another example of the paint with a combination of the mold line. Yeah, some issues with the toenails there. Also, another issue is that mine came with a damaged leg, as you can see here. So be sure to check yours thoroughly. It's not a total knock against it since, shit happens, but still, it'll really bug someone. And that is indeed damaged plastic, so that's not just an easy repair on the consumer end with paint. So, as I made mention before, this 8-bit Godzilla is a repaint of the 1984 Godzilla mold from NECA, with the only real difference being the dorsal plates, them being bigger on the 8-bit Godzilla. So, for those of you who are on the fence because this is a repaint, here is a side-by-side comparison with the standard 1984 Godzilla figure from NECA, so this way you can see where all of the little differences are. In terms of looks, this Godzilla is rather unique. Some QC issues here and there when it comes to paint, but it isn't all that bad. Minor issues aside, NECA did a solid job here. Articulation-wise, this Godzilla is the same song and dance as the previously released Godzilla 1984 from NECA. However, if you're like me, you may end up with an 8-bit Godzilla who has a little looser joints than the normal 1984 Godzilla. So to start things off, we have Godzilla's jaw, which is on a hinge. If you actually tilt the head back, thanks to one of the many ball joints, you can actually see there's a little hinge right in there. So Godzilla's mouth opens and closes. The head is attached to the neck on a ball joint, so this way you can spin Godzilla's head around as much as you would like, alongside rocking it around. And the neck is attached into the body by the shoulders on a ball joint too. So you get even more range of movement. So you can make Godzilla's head do that. It's pretty cool. So moving down to the actual shoulders, we have ball joints. Free movement there. You can even raise Godzilla's arms up like so at the shoulders, which is always nice. And then at the elbows, we have a swivel hinge combo, so you can basically get a ball joint range of movement, but just be careful because they are NECA joints and they do like to bend, and you may think that you're actually moving the joint like normal, and then you're actually bending the joint. So be careful there. So for the wrists, we have a ball joint. Spin Godzilla's hands around like so. little bit of rocking movement too, as you can see here. At the ab crunch, we have a ball joint, and you can spin Godzilla around. You can hear some crackling in there. That's paint coming unstuck, no doubt. But yes, you can rock Godzilla back and forth at the ab crunch. The hips, we have a ball joint, and what I made mention earlier, looser articulation. The hips on this Godzilla, for me at least, are a little easier to move than the standard 1984. Though I have heard reports of some saying that these are harder to move. But to each their own, I guess. Now, coming down to the knees. In the package, this one was like this. It's twisted off to the side. And as you can see there, it's a swivel hinge joint. So just be careful, once again, as I made mention with the elbows, that you're moving the joints properly and you're not actually bending them, because God forbid if you do that, you're going to actually break the joints. We get down to the ankles here, and we have a ball joint. So this way you can spin the foot around like so, which is pretty cool. And then we finally move down to the tail, where this section here is attached to the main body on a ball joint. Then we have this section here attached to this section on a ball joint. This section is a ball joint. And then this portion of the tail is attached to these sections, which are ball joints, and this is wire. So, as I say with all of my other videos where I talk about wire articulation, be careful, don't bend it around like an idiot, because chances are, if you do that, that wire is just going to end up popping through, and nobody is going to have a good time. So it goes without saying that this Godzilla is definitely super articulated, and really it has all of the reasonable joints you could expect for a cheap Godzilla action figure. You're not going to get a super incredible range of movement out of this Godzilla, but I would have to say that it's fairly reasonable. Minor restrictions here and there in terms of range movements for the joints, but at the end of the day, it's a solid figure. Moving on to accessories, this Godzilla figure doesn't really come with any. Except, depending on how you look at it, this awesome box. Because, well, let's face it, it is pretty sweet. And in terms of displaying, there are a lot of collectors who will actually want to display this box either on the shelf with Godzilla in it or behind Godzilla. So just a quick look over of the box here, as you can see, based off of the actual box for the NES game, which is pretty cool. And on the inside of the box there is a little background flap which represents a level from the game, which is a pretty cool concept. And for those interested, here is a quick peek at that little insert. Like I said, pretty neat. And just how big is this Godzilla? Well, here he is alongside some Ultra Acts, here with some normal size SH Monster Arts, now some larger SH Monster Arts, alongside some of NECA's Jaegers, now some of NECA's Pacific Rim Kaiju, and finally the 8-bit Godzilla alongside some other NECA Godzillas. As you can see, this one is just about your average 6-inch scale Godzilla. So, buy Godzilla now, skip it, or wait for a deal. Sculpt and paint-wise, what NECA delivered isn't a bad final product. It just isn't all that it should be. I am indeed in the camp this should be the 54/64 design with the blue paint scheme, and the pixelation effect is new to this figure and this figure line, and I can definitely see why it's a turnoff. However, when looking at it as a goofy novelty item to throw into a collection, and you think of it instead as a tribute figure instead of supposedly being a one-to-one rendition, you can get past some of the issues many others have with it. But then you look at the Predators and the Alien and this and that, and you wonder why they went this particular route. Regardless, at the end of the day, I think this figure is nifty and deserves a spot in a collection, despite it not being a perfect rendition of the Monster of Monsters Godzilla everyone can love and appreciate. It's not perfect, but you know what? On its own, it's a pretty damn fine figure.